going back to Volume 3, and the societies of Peru that dominated during the Classical Age in Europe were the Mochi and the Nazca. This volume, Volume 4, bridges the gap between that period and the discovery of the Americas by European explorers. With Christopher Columbus being the famed discoverer of the Americas in 1492, the period before 1492 is known as the pre-Columbian period. When the Spanish arrived in the lands of the Andes mountain range, they discovered a people called the Inca. And the Inca would have oral traditions which were able to highlight the history of their lands. Coupled with the scientific and archaeological discoveries, we are able to build a picture of the significant cultures which existed in the Andean lands of South America during what we regard as the medieval period of Europe. Before the Inca, there would be three significant cultures that would emerge. They are the Tiwanaku, the Wari, and the Chimor. The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler.
And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Volume 4, The Medieval World. Episode 85, The Tiwanaku, the Wari, and the Chimor. This episode will focus on the complex network of societies of South America, and will continue the focus on the area of the Andes mountain range to the south of the origin of the Amazon River that we tracked during the ancient and classical volumes of the podcast. Advanced human societies were practicing considered forms of architecture and respect to astronomical observances as long ago as 5,000 years ago, as evidenced by archaeology in and around the modern country of Peru, especially the civilization which we call the Norte Chico. Agriculture was also being practiced this long ago in this region, and likely even earlier, as successful agriculture often leads to advanced society. Looking at the modern country of Peru on a map gives us a rough idea of where the most successful known ancient societies of South America originated from before the arrival of the Portuguese and the Spanish at the beginning of the 16th century. Many different cultures existed from northern Peru and its borders with Ecuador, all the way down to the south of the modern Peruvian borders with Chile and Bolivia. A society centred around a religious centre emerged during the 2nd millennium BCE. The religious centre is called Chabin de Huántar, and the placement of the centre was with respect to the position of the sun in the sky, something that we see as very important to ancient South American societies. People of the lands of the Andes were believed to have made pilgrimages to Chabintehuantar, demonstrating the importance of spirituality. There is evidence of an increase in textiles, ceramics and metallurgy in this region during the period of the Chabin culture. The Chabin culture eventually declined towards the end of the first millennium BCE. The decentralisation following the fall of the Chabin would allow the emergence of the Nazca culture, which we discussed during the Classical Age volume. The Nazca would emerge in what would become the coastal lands of South Peru, which had been previously occupied by the people of the Paracas culture. Somewhat simultaneously, a culture which has come to be known as the Moche would emerge in the north of what is now the country of Peru. Archaeological discoveries of tombs during this period demonstrate a beautiful array of precious metal objects which demonstrate the advancement of societies by this period. Meanwhile, to the south, the Nazca built a ceremonial centre called Chahuachi, a more modern centre than Chabintehuantar before it. Spiritual objects and places of these people from the Andes are collectively called huacas. Two of the largest huacas were built by the people of the Mochi culture, the Huaca del Sol and the Huaca de la Luna, respectively the Huaca of the Sun and the Huaca of the Moon. These were two large adobe brick structures. The Huaca de la Luna was built for ceremonial and religious rituals including human sacrifice, while the Huaca del Sol was more for administrative and ceremonial purposes, and has claims to be the largest adobe structure in the world. The Mochi and the Nazca cultures diminished around the year 700, but let us discuss what happened next.
The Tiwanaku Empire.
There were a number of cultures which existed in South America, and we have briefly told the story of the more dominant cultures. In the far south of the modern country of Peru, you will find the country's borders with Chile and Bolivia, and straddling the Bolivian border is a large lake called Lake Titicaca. From the 2nd millennium BCE, an ancient culture emerged which we refer to as the Chiripa, an agricultural and ceremonial society. The people of the Chiripa would migrate from the southern shores of the lake northwards and develop to become the Pucara culture. Throughout the 1st millennium BCE, we can see the proliferation of more religious traditions of the Pucara culture, which has been named the Yayamama religious tradition. Much of the imagery of the Yayamama included the animals of the Andean world, but also stone monoliths with carved male and female depictions on either side of the monolith, the male being Yaya and the female being Mama. Another culture who embraced the Yayamama traditions emerged to the south in the lands that had once been the home of the Chiripa. This would be the Tiwanaku culture, and with the Pucara, the two cultures would become the two main cultures which existed around Lake Titicaca at around the turn of the 1st millennium, in other words, 2,000 years ago. It would be the Tiwanaku culture whose power and influence would outgrow their Pucara neighbours. While the Mochi dominated the Peruvian borderlands of the north, and the Nazca developed on the coastal lands of middle Peru, the Tiwanaku were gaining power in the south around Lake Titicaca. The Tiwanaku were known for their capital city built to the southwest of Lake Titicaca, and it was the highest city of the ancient world up in the mountains. The vast lake helped to regulate the temperatures of the surrounding area, which would have otherwise been too cold for habitation and for agriculture. The lake was vital for directly feeding the city and its agricultural system. Although a settlement may have existed earlier, the construction of the major elements of Tiwanaku city began in around 300 CE. It appears that the city was on an artificial island, which is somewhat indistinguishable if you visit the ancient site today. The southern reaches of Lake Titicaca extended further south than they do today. They once reached the northern fringes of the archaeological site, and the site itself was surrounded by an artificial ditch which created an island on the southern shores of the lake. The people of Tiwanaku were clearly skilled at creating artificial waterways. Irrigation canals, aqueducts and dikes fed the agricultural system of the city. However, what is more astonishing about the Tiwanaku are the incredible construction techniques used for buildings in the city, and these techniques remain a mystery to us to this day. The precision of their stone cutting and their ability to move such stones is something that baffles experts in the modern age. Tiwanaku's mysteries simply add to the debate about whether there are pseudo-scientific reasons for so many unfathomable human feats of construction on the planet, which are famously represented by sites such as Göbekli Tepe, Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt, and also the ability to move the Moai statues of Easter Island, which were described in the last episode. In respect of ancient pyramids, Tiwanaku City had one of its own. Akapana Pyramid is a step pyramid created using these large interlocking stones that denied the necessity for a type of mortar to hold the construction together. With the largest stone weighing around 65 tons, it truly is mystifying how the people of Tiwanaku culture pulled off this incredible project. At its centre was a sunken court. This is quite a traditional feature of South American constructions, going all the way back to the Chiripa and beyond to the Norte Chico. In the 19th century, European explorers found the fallen Gate of the Sun, a gateway carved from andesite stone, a type of volcanic rock. The gateway has now been re-erected and stands almost 10 feet tall. The gate itself depicts a deity whose identity has been debated, but for reference purposes has been called the Gateway God. This depiction has been compared to the deity of the Raimondi Stele at Chabin de Huantar. So it could be the same deity, or at least have some relation to it. We believe that the Gate of the Sun was not found in its original location, and that it could have originally stood in the sunken courtyard of the nearby platform mound called Puma Punku. Another temple mound sits directly to the north of Akapana Pyramid, which itself has its own sunken courtyard. The Kalasasaya temple was constructed in direct alignment with the axis of a compass, suggesting that it was a place of spiritual and ceremonial significance. Once again, we see an isolated regard for astronomy in ancient cultural constructions. It further demonstrates the incredible construction skills of the Tiwanaku. As mentioned before, the construction skills of the Tiwanaku were put to good use in respect of irrigation, and the Tiwanaku created raised planting mounds separated by shallow canals, which would absorb the sun's heat and maintain a degree of radiation through the night. Fish would also pass down the irrigation channels to bolster the food options available. Both domestic plants and animals could be successfully farmed in this environment. Llamas were an important domestic animal, as not only could they be eaten, but also their wool was important for clothing in the cold mountain climate. They could also be used for transport and manure for crops. Quinoa was an important staple crop for the Tiwanaku alongside potatoes. The llama would also be put to use for trade, as caravans of llamas would traverse the lands looking for trade opportunities with neighbouring cultures. Materials that the Tiwanaku likely traded would have included textiles, pottery and gold, all of which were used to create goods with a fair degree of ability. We mentioned that there may have been a connection between the deities of the Chabin culture and the deities of the Tiwanaku culture. Even if we're a little unsure about this, it does seem that there was a strong connection between the artwork of the Chabin and the Tiwanaku. The Chabin had a wide influence, as did the Tiwanaku after them, and it may have been that the Tiwanaku were trying to emulate the Chabin in order to look and feel impressive. This desire to impress appears to have had a positive effect on the surrounding societies, which the Tiwanaku brought into their sphere of influence. By the middle of the first millennium, Tiwanaku influence extended over a large area stretching from the lands of the modern country of Peru down to the lands of northern Argentina. Their potential northward ambitions were checked by a relatively new culture which had emerged in modern Peruvian lands, and their name was the Wari.
The Wari civilization.
Although still in the southern half of Peru, a few hundred miles west of Lake Titicaca is the Ayacucho Basin, and it is believed that the Wari culture originated from this area. The Wari civilization was centred at the city of Wari, but not to be confused with the modern Peruvian city of Wari, which is much further north. The ancient city of Wari is close to the modern city of Ayacucho, which is, of course, in the Ayacucho Basin. We believe that the Wari emerged from this city in the middle of the first millennium, sometime after the emergence of the Tiwanaku. It appears that the influence of the Wari spread quickly. It was buffered in the south by the influence of the Tiwanaku, but to the north the Wari's influence was able to reach the Ecuadorian borders. Both capital cities of the Wari and the Tiwanaku are suggested to have been the homes of tens of thousands of people. The ancient city of Wari is comparable to the city of Tiwanaku, in that they both demonstrated respective areas of residency, ceremony and administration. The layout of both cities was considered by their planners and architects, but it does appear to have been more organised in the older city of Tiwanaku, almost as if Wari needed to be built more hurriedly. Undoubtedly, both cities were impressive centres that were able to command the respect of neighbouring peoples. They were both something to look up to. The nature of both societies in terms of their grandeur and style of influence were very similar. It is a very difficult thing to speculate about the exact relationship between the Wari and the Tiwanaku. The comparative urgency that the city of Wari was constructed could be in response to the threat of power from the Tiwanaku to their south. The Tiwanaku do not seem to have had an equivalent threat in their locality when their city was undergoing rapid expansion some few centuries previous. However, there is no evidence of major warfare between the two civilizations, which suggests that there was some kind of diplomatic relationship between the two. Stone and mud brick were the primary materials used for the construction in Wari city, and it seems that the buildings could be coloured with red and white. They could also be decorated with designs and with the traditional expectations of animal designs and geometric shapes, as is often found to be the favoured artwork choices of the ancient world, and especially in South America. Some of the buildings appear to be very impressive. The city would be separated into sections, often referred to as neighbourhoods, and the neighbourhoods could be surrounded by walls. Within the walls of certain neighbourhoods, there were thick walled enclosures believed to be for the pleasure of the elite members of society, possibly the ruling class. If they were used for religious and ceremonial purposes, then maybe lesser members of society could have been granted access. The walls of these enclosures have been suggested to reach 12 metres or 40 feet in height. Some of the more impressive buildings are believed to have had more than one floor or storey. As time progressed, the Wari actively sought to expand its influence over the surrounding lands, especially during the last 4 centuries of the first millennium, a period called the Middle Horizon of Andean culture, dominated by the Wari and the Tiwanaku. The Wari would help to construct many settlements over a vast area of the Andes at sensible locations all around a similar altitude. These could also serve as centres for administration and trade. This kind of setup would facilitate the spread of the ethos of the Wari, ensuring that as many people as possible were indoctrinated into following the will of the Wari elites. This enabled the Wari to be able to have a cohesive imperial reach. If the Wari were unable to govern a settlement directly, they may choose to build a strong relationship with the local rulers. The local rulers would gain much from the advanced knowledge of the Wari, such as bringing water management techniques that would enable the settlements to be able to manage their agriculture more effectively. It seems that the Wari expansion was quite rapid and successful. To aid the efficiency of the transportation of goods and ideas between the capital city of Wari to what we might describe as the provincial centres of the Wari Empire, the Wari would build a road network between the cities. This was quite a challenge on the intensely undulating terrain of the Andes. Sometimes the road would have to be built with steps to be able to deal with the challenges of the change in elevation. As we have seen in other ancient societies that were expert road builders, such as the Achaemenid Persians and the Romans, this was very important in terms of the speed not just of transport, but of communication and ideas. The road would not only act as the ancestor to the modern road, but also the ancestor to modern telecommunication. For example, if a settlement was getting attacked, it would be a lot quicker and easier to be able to communicate that to the next settlement if there was a constructed road, and the support from that second settlement would be able to reach the first settlement quickly if there was a constructed road. So the importance of a good road network is not to be underestimated. Like the Tiwanaku, the Wari cultivated a varied selection of crops, using similar irrigation techniques and constructing a similar kind of terracing. Their agricultural practices, although arguably not as advanced as those of the Tiwanaku, were nonetheless successful, and evidence of storage facilities points towards a surplus, which the most successful ancient agricultural societies would utilise to keep food available all year round, and at times of low yield, and also for the purpose of trade. Much can be assumed about the religion of ancient societies by observing their art. It appears that the same staff god that the Tiwanaku seem to have inherited from the Chavin appears to have been in the iconography of the Wari culture also. Agriculture relied on a prosperous water source, often subject to climatical anomalies. So, the Wari would make offerings at sites of water sources, such as shells, metals and figurines, in order to encourage water to provide fertility, especially if there was a threat of drought. The regard towards sacred places, or wakas as we have referred to them before, also existed in Wari territory as it did in Tiwanaku territory. As mentioned already, the relationship between the Wari and the Tiwanaku remains mysterious, but the art styles and religious figures appear to be the same, which has led to the interesting speculation that religious ambassadors may have interacted between the two societies, carrying both religious and political messages. There would have undoubtedly have been a wariness between the two societies, but it is reasonable to assume that there was also a healthy diplomatic discourse and trade between the two also.
The Chimor.
The northern reaches of the Wari civilization were the borderlands between the modern countries of Peru and Ecuador, which has once been dominated by the mochi culture, which over the course of the second half of the first millennium had diminished into relative insignificance by comparison to their mighty southern neighbours, the Wari. Some refer to the remnants of the mochi culture as the Sican or Lambayeque culture, but many just consider them to be a continuation of the mochi. The Sican established a new centre at a place called Pampa Grande. Observations of this site include evidence of a class division, with elite areas separated from the rest of the population, and the typical wakas, pyramids and plazas that one would expect to see at an ancient South American site. The elite members of the Sican are referred to as the Sican Lords and are recognised by historians by their elaborate burial practices laden with expensive offerings. The Sican were somewhat restricted in their area by the dominance of the Wari to their south during the period of the Middle Horizon, where the two dominant cultures were the Wari and the Tiwanaku. Towards the end of the first millennium, the political situation in South America began to alter. One of the major reasons for this potential change may have been the climatic phenomenon called El Niño. Trade winds are capable of moving warm surface water across the Pacific Ocean, and this can lead to the rapid movement of large amounts of warm and cold water across the ocean, and this can affect the movement of weather systems that will often affect the Americas by either causing weather systems to carry unusually large amounts of precipitation across certain areas and cause drought in other adjacent areas. If El Niño caused drought in Peruvian lands, then this could have weakened the societies of South America and changed the balance of power in the subsequent period of recovery. Initially, it appears that the Sican had to abandon Pampa Grande, and the effects of drought caused by El Niño has been accused of causing this abandonment by the scientific community. It does appear that the Chimor were able to establish a new capital at a place called Chan Chan, near the modern Peruvian city of Trujillo. Trujillo is also known for being the location of the mochi settlement of Cerro Blanco, where the Huacas del Sol and de la Luna can be found. The Chimor appeared to subjugate the lands that had been dominated by the Sican and securely developed an area along the coastal lands of northern Peru. By the year 1000, Wari power had all but disappeared, so the Chimor were relatively unchallenged. Over the following decades and centuries, the settlement at Chan Chan grew to become the largest pre-Columbian city in South America. Once again, there had to be an advanced irrigation system in order to feed the city located in an arid part of South America. It had to be effective in order to feed a large population. The irrigation system fed terraces, which was typical of city agriculture in South America during this period. The capital city of Chan Chan would contain royal citadel compounds called ciudadelas, which would have multiple functions. High adobe walls would surround the ciudadelas, which were complex in design. Each ciudadela was governed by one of the Chimor lords, who represented the kings on a high administrative level. The structure of the Chimor aristocracy was much more advanced than that of the Sican before them, so the Chimor lords had much more defined responsibility within their societies than the Sican lords. The lords would be the first point of delegation for the king, being responsible for the administration and defence of the city, among other things. The artwork of the Chimor is highly regarded. The textiles were vibrantly coloured and woven with notable expertise. The tunics of the Chimor provide a good example of this, with patterns varying between geometric shapes and lines to animal images and symbols. The Chimor would utilise many different things to enhance their work, such as feathers for headdresses and other items, and seashells that would become beautiful jewellery items. Other materials such as ceramics and metal objects would also be fashioned to become eye-catching objects of desire with a highly creative edge. The seashells that the Chimor favoured were those of the spondylus, a type of scallop which is sometimes informally called the spiny oyster. These appear to be very highly regarded, with the shells being used for jewellery and clothing decoration, but also they could be gathered together and placed as an offering to show that they had a deep spiritual value to the Chimor. Crushed spondylus shells would be scattered before the king so that he could walk on a type of red carpet. South American cultures showed great reverence to the sun and the moon, such as with the Mochi, who built huacas dedicated to both celestial objects. The Chimor apparently had a deity called Si, who was the moon goddess, alongside a sea god called Ni, who would be offered spondylus shells to provide successful fishing. It does also appear that the Chimor carried forward the regard for the Mochi creation deity Apaic. However, it is unsurprising to learn that we have very little information about this, and what information we do have was conveyed by the Inca. The Chimor had disappeared by the time of European arrival in the early 16th century, and that is because of the rise of the Inca. The Inca had emerged from a city further south called Cusco, which is in a similar area of Peru to where the Wari had been based. By this time, the 15th century, the Tiwanaku culture had become a distant memory. The Tiwanaku capital was abandoned in around the year 1000, and the Wari culture dwindled away not long after. We shall discuss the fall of the Chimor and the rising of the Inca in our next episode.
This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
Thank you very much indeed for listening to this week's episode of the History of the World podcast about the Middle Horizon peoples of South America, the Tiwanaku, the Wari and the Chimor. And I'm interested to hear your opinions about this episode. What do you think about these cultures? How important are they in the story of South American history? And what influence do you think they had on the Incas that came after them? If you enjoyed the podcast and want to support the podcast, then visit our website, click on the Patreon link and sign up to make a monthly contribution. By doing so, you will become a lifelong member of the History of the World podcast Illuminati and you'll qualify for gifts and rewards. This week, we welcome to the History of the World podcast Illuminati Ethan Urch, Malik Angalakudati and Larry S. Welcome all three. You can follow this podcast. You can do so by following us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Tumblr, Threads and Mastodon. And I'm always very, very keen to hear your feedback. So if you do choose to give me your feedback, if you do have any comments to make, then do so by dropping me a line directly at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. Your feedback will be discussed in the upcoming episode, the History of the World podcast debrief. So look out for that in the coming days, where we'll be looking at some of your responses and discussing them in depth. And always interesting feedback to be discussed. And also during that special episode, we'll be looking at some of the source material used to bring this episode that you just listened to you. So be sure to look out and listen for that one. Anyway, that's it for this week's. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time on the History of the World podcast, be good.
Meet the new iSIMS, the single talent acquisition platform that's fully future-ready. It works wherever and however you hire, with insights no one else offers. One solution that fits seamlessly into your existing tech stack, which is why IT and HR leaders trust it. With the best of enterprise-grade software and AI, iSIMS helps you identify and secure the right talent faster. iSIMS, powering exceptional hiring. Learn more at isims.com.
The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler. Please consider making a financial contribution by going to the historyoftheworldpodcast.com website and clicking on the Patreon link. Email the show at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. And don't forget to join our social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Tumblr. See you next time.